Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I am back with yet another STAMPtember exclusive through Simon Says Stamp for the month of STAMPtember. This is a collaboration with Neat and Tangled. This is the Holiday Helpers stamp set, and it's adorable. The Neat and Tangled set's always really popular. They have sold out. I still to this day get emails about some of their exclusive sets and whether or not they're, how people can get their hands on them. STAMPtember things, once they're sold out or once STAMPtember is over, they're no longer available, whichever comes first. I'll have more info about that and links on my blog. But yeah, I am inking up the images from this set with VersaFine ONYX black ink, and I'm stamping them onto BRISTOL smooth cardstock. And I'm going to clear heat emboss all of these. You don't have to do the clear heat embossing. I just like doing it because it kind of, keeps everything more contained when I'm doing quick and easy watercoloring. It gives it that little bit of a glossy effect as well, which is kind of nice. So I stamped all the images with that, and then off camera I stamped a few more of the little candy canes, the gifts, and then one of the little mice. I thought it would be cute to stack them up, so I stamped a second one and clear heat emboss that as well. So once everything is stamped, clear heat embossed, ready to go, I am going to use my Arteza real brush pens to do a very simple watercoloring. Just scribble the brush down with a little bit of color and then pull that color out with my little Tim Holtz detail water brush. This is the one I always use. This is definitely my favorite. I do get a lot of questions about water brushes. I used to really not like them, like way back in the day. But I find I always keep like a piece of paper towel or, a cloth on hand to, one, wipe off the brush between colors, and two, if it does happen to get too much water, because sometimes water brushes do have a mind of their own and they like to just, you don't squeeze them generally when you're using them. Especially with this one, I only squeeze it when I feel like it's getting really dry. But I find this one doesn't, leak water a lot. Some water brushes, they just seem to leak water and they're a pain to use. But I just keep a piece of paper towel handy, and when it feels like there's too much water, I dab it on the towel. If I feel like there's not enough, I'll give it a little squeeze, dab it on the towel. If too much comes out, etc. So you just kind of got to work with them. Whichever brush, type of water brush you're using, you kind of you work with it until you get a feel for it and know what's going to work. So all my coloring was, like I said, just simple. I would just scribble on that little bit of color, pull it out with a water brush, and then I just let it dry. And then there was actually this really pale, I think it's literally called like ice blue or something like that color, which was perfect for the snowman and for all the little white areas on these hats. So I added all of that, and then I did something that I've seen other people do this. I rarely mix coloring mediums, but I wanted to add a bit of texture to these little critters, and I didn't really want to do it with the real brush pens because they don't have a felt tip. They have like a brush tip. So I just pulled a few Copics out of my stash that I had just kind of sitting in front of me from previous projects and dabbed them onto the mice and onto the bear. So on the mice, I used a couple of cool grays. I ended up using cool gray 4 and then 6, which was a little darker. And then on the bear, I started with E35 and then I added a bit of E37 to really get it to show up. And I'm just pressing the tip of the marker down to create little spots and little bits of texture. And I really like how that worked. I need to do this more now that I've finally done it once. Kind of using different coloring mediums on the same images. It's kind of fun sometimes to mix and match a bit. So I was also very careful not to touch the tips of my Copics to the heat emboss areas, because a lot of times whatever's in heat embossing powder after it's been melted, a lot of times it can interfere with Copic marker nibs and clog them up. So I was just really aware of it, and that's also why I just did the little bit of dabbing and not anything too crazy, like any real coloring or anything like that. So after all those images are cut out, they're set aside, I die cut more BRISTOL smooth cardstock, this time with the Lawn Fawn stitched hillside backdrop landscape wafer dies, and the top area that's the sky, I took that and I started with just tumbled glass distressing, just regular distressing, and I sponged that on with the mini ink blending tool. And then I decided I really wanted to kind of deepen that color. So I went back in with Broken China distress ink here and started kind of blending that on top of it using just a Post-it note to kind of cover up my fingers, because trying to hold, especially in BRISTOL Smooth, if you're sponging an entire area, your fingers will like move color around, you'll get fingerprints, etc. So I just use, scrap paper, Post-Note, etc. So after I did that, I am going to use the Simon Says Stamp Falling Snow stencil with the Aleene's Glitter Snow Paste again. I absolutely love this stencil, love this paste, and I was curious to see if this would work because in the Gina K video I did the other day, I used a matte setting spray on my watercolor background because I didn't want this paste to like pick up the color, etc. Well, today I was kind of curious and wanted to see if this would pick up color like, a regular embossing paste generally will, especially over Distress ink. So I was going to be okay with this even if it did, tint it a little blue after, as it dries, like if it started to absorb the color. But I got to say, it stayed pretty white. I was impressed. I didn't need to use, the matte spray or anything, or didn't need to redo this panel. So I just scraped that over with a palette knife. And then after I removed the stencil, I just use my fingers to kind of remove any of the little bits that are hanging over the edge of this, especially since I'm going to be inlaying this into the original die cut. And then I immediately take my stencil and my palette knife to the sink and just wash it all off. I don't want to let that stuff dry on my tools because a lot of times it can be really hard to remove after it's dry. So I set that little background aside to dry, and then I just grabbed a piece of, this is Gina K Red Velvet cardstock, and I'm stamping both the sentiments from this set with Simon's clear embossing ink, and then I'm going to use Simon's Detail White embossing powder on both of these. Just sprinkle that on, tap off the excess, and then I'm going to melt these with my heat tool. Once they're melted, I'm going to, pull out the sentiment labels, wafer dies to die cut both of these sentiments. So figure out which size is going to work for both of these. And then once I'm kind of happy with them, and kind of mentally figuring out where I'm going to place these on the outside and inside of my card. So that's why I kind of chose to die cut them like off to the side of each of these, just to make my life a little simpler. So kind of figured that out, and then I'm going to tape these into place with just a little bit of washi tape before I run these through my die cut machine. So once I've got them die cut, they are now perfectly straight little labels for both of these sentiments. So I'm now going to start assembling my scene and all these little critters. So I'm just going to adhere all of this down with just some Gina K Connect glue. I'm going to adhere the stitched hillside backdrop first to my card base. This completely covers up an A2 card base. So get that into place, and then I can inlay that sky background with the falling snow. So I'm going to get that adhered into place, and then I'm going to start adhering all of these little critters and this snowman that they are assembling. So I kind of had a rough idea in my head. I had laid out the stamps before I started this video, kind of just laid out the stamps to give me an idea of like how far, my little scene was going to stretch out. That's why I did it in landscape mode for this card, and just I already had a rough idea of where everything was going to go, so this part went together fairly quickly since everything's already colored, cut, assembled, etc. So I'm going to stack up these little mice because they're trying to put the snowman's head on his body, and I've got another one helping, trying to give candy, and there's something about neat and tangled little like critter images and that I absolutely love them. They're the cutest little things ever. So I just keep adhering all the little elements to create my scene, and some of them I was putting, like after I adhered them, I was stacking up my acrylic blocks on top of them just to hold them in place while the adhesive dries. And then the sentiment, I just trimmed off the one end there and then just adhered that along the top of my card. And then for the inside of the card, I'm going to adhere the larger sentiment. So just adhere that along the lower area of the card. And then I've got one of the little candy canes and one of the little Christmas presents. I'm just going to adhere over the sentiment just to, tie it all together and finish it off, and leave the rest of the inside of the card, blank to write something to the recipient. So after I've got that adhered, I can flip over my card base there and just trim off the excess red cardstock, just using the side of the card as my guide. And then I had a couple little another candy cane and one more gift. So I was like trying to figure out where I'm going to put them. And I decided to make this one candy cane. The snowman's holding the candy cane. So I just kind of tucked that under the top little mouse there. And then I had that one little gift left. So I just kind of tucked that in beside the snowman as well. So just added a little dab of glue. And then there's a final bit of embellishment. You could leave it here, but I wanted to add like just a little bit more. Plus I was really wanting to use, I got the Nouveau Fresh Snowfall Accents in a haul. God, I got it a couple months ago, something like that. And really wanted to use it. So I, started by just applying it to the snowdrifts, and then I started applying it to the images, just kind of dabbing it on, kind of keeping it light. Didn't want to cover up the texture I'd created, but it's snowing. So there's snow all over all these fun little characters and everything, and it just, love it. So you got to set this aside and let it dry. And once it's dry, it's good to go. So that was my card for today. As always, there will be a link below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used. So you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.